What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Fantasy Reserve. My name is Vitrano, and I'm joined here by my co-host.
I'm Matt, of course.
And we are back after a 2-week hiatus. I just got a new job. Matt's suffering at his job, so it's been a little rough to try and schedule this, but we're back and better than ever to bring you guys some fantasy tips. Um, what do you think of how the season's gone so far, Matt? Obviously, we're in a league together. How do you think everybody's faring so far?
I think I'm faring pretty well in the league that we're in, and then another league that we're in with mutual people that we know. I'm number two in the one with you against you, and I'm number one in the other. So I'm feeling pretty good this season. My third league is an auction league that I'm currently towards the bottom, but I'm just gonna say I'm kind of unlucky. But overall, the season's been going pretty good for me so far.
Yeah, I wish, there are definitely some rough patches that I've experienced this season. I'm in a dynasty league that I have made the playoffs every year, been the highest scorer pretty much every year, and won the championship twice. And I'm sitting at 3-4 with the most points scored against me by far. So that's pretty rough. Every other league, though, I would probably say I'm about 4-3, because injuries happen, things happen. I'm probably middle of the board, whereas I usually expect to be toward the top. But it is what it is. It's not been my best season so far, but we're still getting through it. We're still projected for a lot of playoff runs.
Yep, you got it there. So, Vetrano, what do you think of this past week of football?
A lot of injuries. There are a lot of new players that are jumping on the scene, that are going to be a pretty big pickup for your waiver wire this upcoming week. We saw some injuries to guys like Godwin, Brandon Ayuk, just to name a few of them, where somebody's going to have to step up and step into that role, and it's just a matter of who's actually going to be the person that does it. Um, so I guess we can jump right into our waiver wire pickups of the week. We'll just give one or two each and go from there. There is a lot to talk about. So Matt, why don't you give us your number one waiver wire pickup?
So, my number one waiver wire is going to be Juwan Jennings. We saw that he has a lot of rapport with Brock Purdy. He dropped the 40-point game. And now that we know Ayuk is out, the next step are kind of like Debo and then probably Juwan Jennings. So, if he's on your waiver wire, I would try to get him at all costs. This could be like a wide receiver one or two ish area with a pretty good QB, depending on your opinions on Brock Purdy. I think he's a good QB. Juwan Jennings has shown that he can score you high fantasy points with him. So I think Juwan Jennings is the number one pickup of the week. I have the number two waiver wire priority in one league, and I'm going to burn it to get Juwan Jennings if I can. And if you're spending fab, I think you could easily spend over 25% up to even 50% because this could be a wide receiver one in the making.
Yeah, you know what? I absolutely agree with you, Matt. As a 49ers fan, obviously it's tough seeing Brandon Ayuk go down, especially after we gave him all that money. So it's really tough to see him, be out for the rest of the season when we were supposed to have Super Bowl aspirations. But as far as fantasy is concerned, Juwan Jennings, the 1 week where he had that spotlight on him, he excelled. 12 targets, 11 receptions for 175 yards and 3 touchdowns. Obviously, that was without Debo, without Brandon Ayuk, really, and without George Kittle. I expect the same type of, maybe not the same level of performance, but a similar sizable performance from Juwan Jennings for the remainder of this year. I'm expecting probably 6 to 8 targets per game, probably 60 to 90 yards on average per game, and the occasional touchdown, which, for how many injuries are coming out here, that's a pretty decent, pretty big stat line for you. That could get you back into the playoffs if you have some guys on your injury report. Um, Another guy that got injured actually was Chris Godwin. And I know that you have him in our league that we go up against each other. How do you feel about the Chris Godwin injury?
Honestly, he was my wide receiver one. I'm pretty sad to lose him. He's having a phenomenal season, and if you're probably like the rest of everybody, you're kind of upset that the coaching staff is playing them in the last minute of an unwinnable game. But fantasy wise, yeah, losing Godwin is kind of a huge hit. I think one idea for people in other leagues, whether you have Godwin or not, is you might want to try to trade for Mike Evans. He's out. If you can kind of get a deal for him, against people that need to win now, and you get a decent trade, Mike Evans might be a good like long term trade play. Baker's playing pretty phenomenal this season, and Mike Evans is really just a touchdown machine. He gets like 1,000 yards every single season. Like he does not slow down, and he's consistent every season. So he'd be a really good person to trade for.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I know some people are targeting some of the other wide receivers in the Tampa Bay room as their number one waiver wire pickups, guys like Trey Palmer or Sterling Shepard or even Jalen McMillan. For me, though, I'm gonna go ahead and choose my number one waiver wire pickup of this week is going to be Cedric Tillman. Cedric Tillman hopping right into that role that Amari Cooper left, and he looked amazing. 12 targets, 8 catches for 81 yards, 18 total points. He didn't even score a touchdown. He's stepping right into this Amari Cooper role. And with Deshaun Watson now out and Jameis Winston probably more than likely going to be the starter for the remainder of the year, I'm expecting big things from Cedric Tillman because the one thing that I do know about Jameis Winston is he is not afraid to just throw the ball. Who's down there, it could be 4 people, he's still going to try and throw the ball to his guy. So Cedric Tillman, he's currently rostered in about 2% of leagues on Sleeper. Go ahead, pick him up. Even if he doesn't work out too well, he's poised to just be successful in that offense. He looks like that number one guy. I don't care about Jerry Jeudy. I don't care about Elijah Moore. Cedric Tillman is my guy.
All right, so you've heard it here for the waiver wire pickups. How about we get right into the NFL schedule?
Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and we can start with Thursday night's game. We have the Vikings heading to SoFi Stadium to take on the Rams. Who are your favorite guys in this matchup, Matt?
On the Vikings side, Justin Jefferson, of course. I'm an Addison fan. I like Addison, of course. Aaron Jones, honestly, playing much better than I expected him to this year. Last year, he came off an injury and he played atrociously. And then this year, I didn't start him because I remembered he played bad off an injury and then he dropped 20 points off of an injury. So Aaron Jones is honestly playing great this year. So I like everybody in the Vikings matchup. And the Rams, probably just Kyron for me. I don't know too much about if like Puka or Cooper Cup are coming back soon or not. Maybe you know better.
Yeah, so what I see here, Minnesota's defense is absolutely incredible. They have performed amazingly. Their one loss, obviously, coming last week to Detroit. We'll talk more about them later. But other than that, they have been really solid defensively. I don't see Matthew Stafford being successful this week. He has been horrible throughout the entirety of this year. 28th in PPR for quarterbacks. Obviously, PPR doesn't matter for them, but 28th overall. Kyron Williams, on the other hand, absolutely looks phenomenal. I just traded for him in our league. And only had to give up Malik Neighbors to do so, but I really needed a running back. So he scored in every single week so far this year. He has a total of 8 touchdowns through 7 weeks, and that includes a week where he had a bye. So he is absolutely killing it this year. I do think Cooper Cup, what I saw, Puka and Cooper Cup have started practicing this week. I think that if they both play, uh, or if they're both able to play, you definitely start them both. Nothing else to really say about the Rams. On the Viking side, I like everybody. Aaron Jones, if he plays, he's gonna be phenomenal. Sam Darnold, this is going to be a really good week for him, I would think, especially with Justin Jefferson on his team. Jordan Addison, I want to see more from him. He's had, most of his games have only been 4 targets. He had one game against the Jets where he had 8 targets, but he hasn't really been targeted that much. I would like to see more from him before I go around starting him. But the biggest thing for this week is TJ Hawkinson could potentially be coming back, which changes a lot in that Minnesota offense because now he's going to be demanding targets as well. So it's a very interesting matchup this week. I think go with your guys, start your Jeffersons, start your Kyron Williams, your Aaron Jones, even Sam Darnold. Uh and if Hawkinson plays, I'm pretty tempted to start him as well.
Yeah, I love Hawkinson. Hawkinson plays great. I think he's like one of the best tight ends. So, but I wouldn't be afraid to start all the other receivers on the Vikings just because Hawkinson's going to get targets. Because there's also the counter argument that he's going to draw attention away from them by the defense, so he might open up more opportunities as well. So I would just say start your guys and just don't even think about it.
I absolutely agree. We can go ahead and move on to the next matchup. The Ravens going to Cleveland to take on the Browns. What do you think, Matt?
Oh man, this is going to be just a complete blowout. The Ravens are going to just stomp the Browns. I don't care if they're getting a new QB or not. Like they're just not it. And then for fantasy wise, Lamar is gonna get you points. He always gets points. Zay Flowers is kind of a coin toss if he's gonna get you points that week or not. And then Derrick Henry is arguably the best running back in the NFL right now. So on the Ravens, I would safely start Lamar and Derrick Henry, and then I would kind of think long and hard about like if I'm willing to gamble on one of the two tight ends or gamble on Zay Flowers or not.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I definitely feel like this offense is entirely Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. I don't think there's any question about it. Um, Zay Flowers, after having 2 really good weeks in a row against Cincinnati and Washington, kind of puts up a dud uh, against Tampa Bay in a game where it was super high scoring. And that's not really what you want to see from a guy who you're expecting to produce a good amount of points for you. So I can understand the skepticism in starting Zay Flowers. I hate the tight ends. Mark Andrews does look like he's kind of coming back into form. He is currently the 11th tight end, and that's after having 2 games where he scored 0 points, and he scored 3 points in week one. Um, so we're gonna have to see how that goes for the remainder of this year. On the Cleveland side, I'm not ready to start anybody yet, not even Cedric Tillman, like I had mentioned before, but I am willing to start David Njoku as always. 14 targets last week, 10 receptions for 76 yards, and a touchdown thrown to him from Jameis Winston when he came in. He's the safety blanket on this team. He's ready and he's capable of carrying the load in this passing offense. He is a must start everywhere. There's no question about it for me.
Yep, I agree. How about we go on to the Titans versus the Lions, and you can tell us your thoughts first.
The Titans are so bad. The Titans are horrible, Matt. That Will Levis is a bad quarterback. I think the experiment with Will Levis is done. I think that they should start Mason Rudolph and see if he can add a little more spark to this offense. I know he didn't do much against Buffalo, but I still feel like it's more than what we saw from Will Levis. He did fumble 3 times. He did lose one of them, but I would still probably ride with Mason Rudolph. I think they have a much more competent passing attack. But other like overall, Tennessee's just bad. I don't even want to start Tony Pollard this week. I have him in our league, and I'm honestly contemplating just not starting him at all because I know how this game is going to go. I know that It's not going to be a game where Pollard's going to run for 100 yards against Detroit's top of the line defense, or at least rushing defense. So I hate everybody from Tennessee. On Detroit, I love absolutely everybody except for Sam Laporta. Sam Laporta is, pretty touchdown reliant at this point in an offense that runs the ball. Uh, Everybody else is worth a start, in my opinion. Maybe not Goff. I would think about sitting Goff as well, but Gibbs, Montgomery, Amon-Ra, St. Brown, absolutely. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you said. The Titans, I would not start any of them. Lions have the fourth best rushing defense right now, so putting Pollard in that would be kind of iffy. It doesn't guarantee that he won't score points, but with the top rushing defense and likely playing from behind against a high-powered Lions offense, I wouldn't feel comfortable starting Pollard if you have other options. And then yeah, on the Lions, pretty much everybody about or besides Sam Laporta is kind of a must start. And Jared Goff, yeah, he's also kind of a coin flip. So if you have somebody better than him, I would start him or more consistent. But he can either score you 12 points or 22 points. It's just really a coin flip. But yeah, I don't have anything else to add about that matchup.
Yeah, I think what it comes down to is the Titans have a very surprisingly good pass defense, which is why I'm leaning toward benching Goff for a better option. Granted, I know a lot of people probably drafted Goff as their QB1, but I think if you do have a better option, this is the week that you want to sit him because I think Tennessee is a very difficult matchup, and going against a very tough opponent last week in Minnesota, he only scored 15 points. Or sorry, nine. He did score 19 points. It's 15 points in our league that he scored,
Yeah,
but it
just to play devil's advocate on that. Um Amon-Ra is Amon-Ra, and Jahmyr Gibbs does get receiving work, and as we saw him get 2 touchdowns or whatever last week. So there is points available for Goff, so I wouldn't feel too scared to start him, but you just have to consider that he might get you like 12.
Yep, absolutely agree. So we can take that into the next matchup. Why don't you tell us your thoughts about the Colts versus the Texans?
Well, let me start with the Texans first because, CJ Stroud, you're going to start most likely in your team. Mixon, he's looking pretty good this season, surprisingly. Uh, Diggs, you're going to start. Tank Dell, you're probably starting. Uh, in terms of the Colts, I don't even know who's the QB this week, but do you know actually, Vitrano, who the QB is?
My best guess would be Anthony Richardson because I don't see anything that says that he's hurt currently.
Well, if Richardson's starting, then I would definitely think twice about starting Pittman over somebody else because Pittman, he only gets like 10 to 12 points with Richardson. So if you have a receiver that you think can be better than 10 to 12 points, I would probably not start anybody on the Colts offense besides like Jonathan Taylor, but he's still out, I think.
Yeah, um, Jonathan Taylor dealing with an injury. He's been out for the last 3 games. They've kind of been able to do a little bit on the ground. Obviously, Sermon had that one good week and then just fell off a cliff. And then Tyler Goodson, people think that he might, have a little something something. But overall, this is going to be a very tough matchup for Indianapolis. I feel like Anthony Richardson is just making dumb mistake, overthrowing his players. I don't think he's in a position right now to easily win this game, and frankly, he's not making his wide receivers better. So I don't like really anybody on the Colts, not even Jonathan Taylor if he plays, because I don't expect this to be a close game. Whereas Houston, obviously, CJ Stroud is going to be a must start. Granted, it was really rough last week. I had CJ Stroud and ended up trading him. He went for 86 yards, got sacked 4 times, scored about what, just a couple points. So really rough to be a CJ Stroud owner. I think he bounces back this week. along with Diggs. I think he's going to have a very good week. Tank Dell, I'm still iffy on. He seems like he might be a little bit part of this offense, then he seems like he's absolutely not part of it at all. So I'm questionable about him. My biggest start of the week in this game, though, is going to be Joe Mixon. I think that Joe Mixon versus the Colts defense is going to make for cinema. The Colts currently give up the second most points per game on average to running backs, only trailing the Cardinals. So I think that this is going to be a good week for Joe Mixon. Uh, yeah, so that's how I feel about the Texans' offense currently.
All right, let's go into the Packers and the Jaguars. How about you give us your thoughts on that as well?
Um, so this is a very interesting matchup for me. I expect Jordan Love to be amazing and just to, produce like he has been. I think Josh Jacobs could potentially be really great this week as well. He was heavily involved versus Houston, especially on the receiving end, catching his first receiving touchdown ever in his career. And it seems like he's a pretty good, pretty decent start. Currently 15th running back in PPR come with the wide receiver core in Green Bay as they always have. If everybody plays, you don't know who you need to start. Dobbs has performed well over the last 2 weeks, but Jaden Reed could take all of those points at some point. Christian Watson scored 15 points last week randomly, and Dontavian Wicks scored 13 this past week. You don't know who's going to be successful in this offense, especially adding in the tight end. Uh, it's hard for me. I feel like you're definitely going to start Jaden Reed, but after the and Tucker Craft, but after that it gets iffy. Um, on the Jacksonville side, I think this is going to be a rough game all around for all of them. I don't think that anybody in this Jacksonville offense is going to be successful. I don't imagine that it's going to be a close game. Maybe Evan Ingram and Brian Thomas Jr. Just for the pure value of they're going to receive targets no matter what. But other than that, I'm a little iffy on everybody here. What do you think, Matt?
I agree with pretty much everything besides the Brian Thomas Jr. I think Brian Thomas Jr. has been playing like pretty phenomenal. I haven't gotten a chance to really watch much like footage of him, mostly because he's on the Jags. But anyway, Brian Thomas Jr., I saw a stat about him that it was like he's like the number one rookie in like touchdowns and passing yards and, or whatever he was. So I'd say Brian Thomas Jr. is like pretty great right now. So I would probably start him without much fear.
Yeah. I just traded Brian Thomas Jr. in our league along with CJ Stroud to get Jalen Hurts and Marvin Harrison Jr. Um, I know that we had some differing opinions on that in particular. I know you really like Brian Thomas Jr. So that's where like the question marks are. I hope to see him succeed. I just, hope he doesn't succeed anymore against me. So
Yeah, I'm a little more critical because I have Marvin Harrison Jr. in two leagues, so I watch him closely, and he just doesn't perform as like the number one wide receiver draft is supposed to perform. So I'm not as high on him as I once was, and whereas Brian Thomas Jr. is just kind of like killing it in fantasy right now. Also, just to wrap it up for the Packers. I think Jaden Reed is the standout wide receiver one, and you're pretty much playing him every week just because they have a high-powered offense. And then next up is probably Dobbs. Even though he has a bad attitude, he's still high scoring, but you have to kind of think if you want to start him or not. But in terms of the Packers, I think Jaden Reed is probably usually an auto start just because of his high potential.
yep, I absolutely agree. And with that, we can transition into talking about Marvin Harrison Jr.'s team, the Cardinals, as they take on the Dolphins. Matt, what do you think about this game?
Well, the Dolphins, I just don't want anything to do with them. I don't want to like think about them existing. They've just been so unfun to watch this season. Their fantasy has been just so disappointing. And in terms of the Cardinals, yeah, I don't know. Like Kyler Murray, he'll have some good games, he'll have some bad games. Marvin Harrison Jr. will have some good games and some bad games. I saw some like little mini hospital balls last week to him from Kyler Murray. McBride, people are thinking was going to be the tight end, like one of the NFL. He's done okay this season. James Conner has done okay. So I'm a little sour and salty about the Cardinals. I thought they were going to play a lot better, and then they played very decently, very okay, very high score or low score games.
Yeah, I agree. This game is disgusting to me. I'm not gonna lie. I hate all of Miami. Uh, what I will say is, as of an hour ago, this is currently being recorded at 7:39, on Pacific Standard Time. Uh, so about an hour ago, Tua is projected to be practicing tomorrow, which means there is a possibility that he plays in week 8 against the Cardinals, and that changes the entire dynamic of the Dolphins offense. That means that A Chain might be actually viable. Tyreek and Jalen Waddle might again be viable. So I would keep your eyes on that. If you have any of those players, hopefully he stays healthy this time and can continue to play football. But too many concussions, might have to consider retiring. As far as the Cardinals are concerned, it's been very hit or miss. Kyler Murray is currently the 7th overall quarterback, and I think that is largely having to do with his rushing upside. He currently has 325 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns. Uh, so that adds quite a bit of points. Uh, but with that, I think that guys like James Conner have kind of struggled a little bit. He's had his good games, but he's also had some bad games so far versus Detroit and Green Bay. You never know what you're going to get. I expect him to be successful this week against a very poor Miami defense. Um, Marvin Harrison Jr. just traded for him. I would love to see him absolutely pop off and lead my team to the playoffs. I just don't know what I'm gonna get from him, and I guess that's the exciting mystery. Uh, the other receivers I have no interest in, and Trey McBride is currently sitting at tight end 5. He is currently uh averaging about 7 targets per game. So you know, continue to play him. Overall, I just don't have any care or a lot of care in this game, but it seems like with Tua coming back, things might get a little interesting.
Yeah, to also talk about a matchup I don't really have much care about. The next one we're going to talk about is the Jets and the Patriots. I think the only auto start person in this entire game is Brees Hall. What do you think, Petrano?
Yeah, this game is disgusting. I hate this game. 2-5. We expected the Jets to be a lot better. I thought their defense for sure would be able to hold up a lot more, but in a shocking turn of events, their offense is just as bad as it was last year with Zach Wilson, and I think that says a lot. I definitely think Brees Hall is the only must-start player in this game. Um, I think that there is potential for Garrett Wilson and Devonte Adams, but there's a lot of mouths to feed now in this offense. Uh, they could both get 12 targets, or they could both get 5 targets, depending on how the game goes. So I'm not too confident in either one. Um, yeah, you're definitely going to start them because you have them, but I'm not happy about it.
Yeah, honestly, and nobody on the Patriots is startable. I mean, I'm down to just talk about the Falcons versus the Buccaneers.
Yeah, I think you can consider Hunter Henry. He looked good with Drake May, but that's about it. I don't have any interest in anybody else. We can go ahead and move on to the Falcons and the Buccaneers. What do you think about this game, Matt?
Well, before I talk about this game, I will say one thing about the Hunter Henry thing. So, you know, if he pops off one week, then the team the next week is probably going to plan for him. So just because he pops off one week, the next week does it, he might even do like worse. Or he might do really bad just because the team plans around him. But in terms of the Falcons and the Buccaneers, so the Falcons, they've played very also kind of like the Cardinals, is very wishy-washy. They have like crazy games and they have like very underperforming games. Kirk Cousins, he's a very like mid-performing quarterback. He's like in the mid, he's like number 14 or 15. Like put into perspective, Bo Nix, a rookie on the Broncos, is doing better fantasy-wise than Kirk Cousins. So if you have Drake London, you probably draft him high and you're probably going to start him. If you have Bijan, you draft him high and you're going to start him. Um, in terms of the Buccaneers, Baker, he's playing great, but he just lost Godwin and Mike Evans isn't playing, so they might lean more heavily on the run game. So you might want to consider sitting Baker if you have a more viable QB. Otherwise, you're just gonna have to start him. But yeah, otherwise, there's players from these teams that you just kind of have to start. But I don't know. I don't really feel good about starting these players because it is kind of a coin flip week to week.
Yeah, I will say, definitely this week, if there's anything that I've learned about the Buccaneers defense, it's I'm definitely starting Kirk Cousins this week. Um, Obviously, you paid a lot for Bijan, grabbing him in the first round. If you have him, you're definitely starting him. And I'm definitely starting Drake London, as I do have Drake London on my team. And ever since that first week, that dude has been unstoppable. Third overall in PPR, four wide receivers. I'm really happy that I drafted him currently. He is leading my receiver core, especially now that I've traded both Brian Thomas Jr. and Malik Neighbors away in my on my team and have Nico Collins on the IR. But other than that, Tampa Bay, I would still consider starting Baker because of how successful he was against Atlanta the last time they played 3 weeks ago. But I'm not too excited about anybody else in particular, except for maybe Cade Otton. And I only say Cade Otton because without Godwin, without Mike Evans. I think he's going to be that security blanket. He got 10 catches, or sorry, 10 targets, 8 catches for 100 yards last week. I expect him to have a bigger role, just like I expect one of the receivers in Tampa Bay to have a bigger role. We just don't know who it is yet.
Yeah, I will say I didn't really know that they played each other week 5, so because I wasn't paying attention to the schedule, and they're playing each other just 3 weeks later. But I did just look it up, and Drake London did have a monster game against the Buccaneers. So yeah, you're probably gonna start Kirk Cousins and Drake London if they had such a monster game, especially now that the Bucks are out like their main two wide receivers. They're gonna struggle. Morale's gonna struggle on the defense side. But now that I think about it more, I do feel more comfortable starting the Falcons players.
Definitely. I think that there's a lot of high-powered offense on this Falcons, and they're just slowly but surely waiting to be unleashed. I don't think that their best performance was what we saw last week against the Seahawks, where they just kind of capped the bed. So I expected this to be a bounce back game for them. Um, that being said, we can go ahead, move on to the next game. We're looking at the Eagles taking on the Bengals. What are your thoughts on this matchup, Matt?
Yeah, so on the Eagles side, I'm just gonna talk about the players to start, in my opinion. So Jalen Hurts probably a must start. AJ Brown doing pretty good. Saquon is a must start. Saquon is like one of the top 3 dominant running backs. Definitely gonna start him. On the Bengals side, how about you tell us about the Bengals side, Vitrano? You probably have the stats. I don't have the stats on hand about the Eagles defense.
I absolutely can tell you all about these stats, Matt. The Eagles currently give up the most points to wide receivers. You're going to start the Bengals wide receivers. You're going to start T. Higgins. You're going to start Jamar Chase. Philadelphia's just been, bad. in terms of giving up points to quarterbacks and receivers. They also give up the third most points per game to the quarterback position. So I expect Joe Burrow to have a day with T. Higgins, have a day with Jamar Chase, and I feel like we're gonna see a very high scoring game on the side of the Bengals. Um, that being said, I think this whole game is beautiful. This whole game should be a high scoring game because the defenses are just that bad, man. The Bengals do give up over 17 points per game on average to the quarterback position, that they haven't had great teams that they played against. So I think taking out games that the Bengals have played against, like the Patriots, for example, like versus the Browns, for example, it just bumps that number up so much more. Um, Bengals also have given up already over 4,200 passing yards. That's good enough for what I'm seeing here is the seventh most in the entire NFL. It They're just not great. I love everybody in this matchup. Start the whole offense. Start Devontae Smith, AJ Brown, Barkley, Jalen Hurts. I start Burrow, Higgins, Jamar Chase, Chase Brown. Start everybody.
Yep, I will start Chase Brown. I have him in one of my leagues as one of my main running backs because Pacheco got injured and Aaron Jones was injured.
I definitely will say though, it definitely is much more sketchy to start Chase Brown. The Eagles do give up fifth least amount of points per game to the running back position. I will throw that out there. I just expect this game to be a shootout.
Fair enough. All right, let's talk about the Saints versus the Chargers. So the Saints, I'm just going with Kamara off the Saints, and then the Chargers. And the Chargers have a good rushing defense, but Kamara, he always gets a touchdown if he needs to. So he'll get a touchdown despite any rushing defense. So I'm starting Kamara comfortably, and then the Chargers. Only person considering starting on that defense is J.K. Dobbins, and that might be his week because the Saints' rush defense is almost bottom tier. So, any other thoughts on that, Petrona?
So, what I will say, I hate this game. This is like me. This game right now is worse than the Arizona Miami game. I think that this is a very disgusting game. I don't expect this to be a very high scoring game. That being said, I do think Derek Carr is probably going to come back this week. If he comes back, Kamara is going to be heavily involved. You can look at his average targets per game throughout the entirety of this year. He has 34 catches and 43 targets through 7 games. He's averaging just about 5 catches and 6 targets a game. So he's going to be involved. Chris Olave should come back and play. Hasn't been the greatest so far this year, but the Chargers do give up quite a lot of points to the wide receiver position, actually the fifth most. So I would consider starting Olave. Everybody else in this entire game, I just don't really have any interest in. J.K. Dobbins, I feel like is going to have a very disappointing week. Lad McConkey had a kind of a disappointing week the last 2 weeks. I don't have any interest in anybody else really.
All right, I think on that note, we can go to the Bills and the Seahawks.
So
How about you start us off on that?
I think that the Bills and the Seahawks are an interesting matchup. I don't really know what to expect out of Josh Allen nowadays. I do think the Seahawks defense is really poor. Um, and that probably because they have a whole bunch of injuries. And I'm expecting Josh Allen to be amazing. I'm expecting, James Cook to pop off and show us something, especially because the Seahawks give up the third most points per game to the running back position. Um, I love Amari Cooper in this matchup. I love, yeah, I just kind of love pretty much everybody in this entire game. I don't think that either of these defenses are too crazy. I think that this could potentially also be a shootout game. Um, I would definitely start every person in this game, Matt. I'm not gonna lie, because even Kenneth Walker, who I am skeptical about, is going to get involved in the passing game if things aren't going well, and he's still going to score points. Uh, the one thing I will bring up is DK Metcalf is currently dealing with a knee injury, which might open things a little more to Tyler Lockett and Jackson Smith and Jigba. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add. I'm just going to go ahead and agree that I feel pretty comfortable starting everybody in this game just based on the high-powered offenses and, the weaker defenses. Gino's been having a good season. I feel comfortable starting him and his wide receivers. The Bills, Josh Allen scores like 20 points a game. I feel comfortable starting him with his wide receivers, Shakir and Amari Cooper. And James Cook, he had a strong beginning of the season, so yeah, I feel pretty comfortable with all these players, Vitrano.
Yep. Then we can go ahead and move on to the next game. Let's talk about the Bears going to Washington to take on the Commanders. What are your thoughts, Matt?
Yeah, so I think a year or two ago, if you heard the Bears versus the Commanders, you'd be kind of also grossed out. But this is one of the better games nowadays. I think the Bears have a top tier defense, and Caleb Williams is putting up some points. DJ Moore's, I believe, putting up some points, and even the Bears running back is putting up some points. So I feel like if you have to start them, you probably drafted them on the lower side and you have room to flex them, which could have good payoffs. In terms of the Commanders, I think Jaden Daniels is still out. Correct me if I'm wrong. So that is gonna kind of deplete the offensive power of them, specifically McLaurin, but you could still play their running backs. So I think this will be a fun game to watch, and I think there's definitely some viable people to start.
Yeah, I agree to a certain level with everything. I am skeptical about the Washington offense because what I'm seeing here is Jaden Daniels' status is very much up in the air, which means Marcus Mariota will come back into the game to start. And while he did play well last week, the Bears defense is pretty solid. I'm kind of worried about this entire Washington offense for this upcoming week. Uh, I don't know really what to expect with Mariota taking the helm. I would hope that they would have the same level of success that they did last week, throwing it to McLaurin, and the running game being successful. But they played against Carolina last week. This is a whole different team. That being said, I love Chicago here. I think, you know, I have the stats pulled up. Washington is the worst team defensively in terms of giving up fantasy points, Matt. They give up the most points per game to quarterbacks, the second most points per game to wide receivers, and the fourth most points per game to running backs. I would start pretty much everybody on this Chicago offense. Caleb Williams, DeAndre Swift especially, DJ Moore. I'm definitely starting these guys. This should be a game where they should find some success because of how poor Washington's defense is. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm gonna agree. The Washington defense just not very good. Bears are playing much better than expected, in my opinion. So yeah, I'm pretty okay with starting them. And like I said, you probably drafted them on the lower side, so you can easily flex them and get high dividends.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't think you spent like a second round pick on grabbing DeAndre Swift. So more than likely, they're your like third, fourth option at the position, and you feel super comfortable playing them against a favorable matchup this week. That being said, we can move into the next game. Panthers going to take on Denver. What do you think about that game, Matt?
So on the Panthers, I still like Chuba Hubbard. Other than that, I don't really like anybody on that offense. And then the Broncos, the Broncos are kind of weird. Like I mentioned, uh, Bo Nix is actually having a better season fantasy wise than Kirk Cousins. The Panthers are the bottom tier rush defense. So if you're unfortunate enough to have one of the Broncos running backs, you probably want to start them this week. I think I was considering actually starting Sutton myself and Bo Nix in my Superflex league that I'm in with Vitrano. I think that they could have a very good game against the Panthers with a bottom tier pass defense as well. Sutton had 0 points last week, but usually when a wide receiver has like 0 points, they give a little talking to the team, and then they will come out a little stronger the next week. So I'm considering starting him and Bo Nix together for this matchup.
And I think that that could really pay off, Matt. I will say about your Chuba Hubbard pick, the Broncos do give up the most rushing yards to running backs in the entire NFL, with just under 2,000 rushing yards allowed. They have allowed 12 running touchdowns to running backs as well, and 6 receiving touchdowns to running backs. I think Hubbard is in a prime position to be successful here. I'm expecting him to. That being said, I don't really like anybody else in this game from Carolina. Deontay Johnson might have a little bit of a bounce back, but Denver does have a surprisingly really solid defense. Um, and then on the Denver side, Panthers, their passing defense is still kind of solid. But it's a matter of how much are they going to bend before they break. And I think that in a game here versus a very tough defensive team in Denver and them having a very poor rushing defense, I think Denver's just kind of grind them away. Javonte Williams might have just as good of a week this week as he did last week versus Carolina. Or sorry, last week versus New Orleans. I think that he could be just as successful, but I think that the biggest guys for me that I'm starting this week are going to be the running backs from both of these teams.
Yep, I would agree with that. Let's go to the Chiefs and the Raiders. Tell us your thoughts on that.
Patrick Mahomes sucks. He sucks this year. I don't care what anybody says. He threw 2 picks and no touchdowns to the 49ers. He saved his fantasy day with a running touchdown, but the dude just sucks this year. If you drafted Patrick Mahomes, you should be really sad. Um, on the flip side, Kareem Hunt looks poised to continue his success uh, for the remainder of the time that he is the number one back if Pacheco comes back this season. You're still riding with Kareem Hunt currently. He's still winning you games. It's great. Keep starting him. I told you guys about Xavier Worthy. I don't think Xavier Worthy is that guy. I don't think he's going to be a guy that's going to get you a lot of points. I feel like he is touchdown dependent a lot of the time, and he has had touchdowns in week 4 and 5 to save his fantasy week. I just don't know how often that's going to happen. Hate Xavier Worthy. Kelsey, obviously, um, you're going to start him, unfortunately. Hopefully, he continues to bounce back with Mahomes, but there's no guarantee. Um, what do you think about the Raiders' offense, Matt?
Um, Honestly, I'm not super knowledgeable currently about the Raiders offense. I don't even think about their offense. I don't really have any of their players, nor do I really want to have any of their players. So I'm gonna have to leave it to you to give me your thoughts, Vetrano, because I just don't even follow their offense at all.
So I will say Gardner Minshew um, is going to come back this week into that starting role. Aiden O'Connell will be out for the next 4 to 6 weeks, which means that either way the Raiders were going to suck. I don't expect Madison to have a successful week this week against the Chiefs. He has been very good over the last couple of weeks and scoring you fantasy points, but I don't see it happening against the Chiefs. The only player you're going to want to start from this team is going to be Brock Bowers, who currently leads receiver or tight ends in targets, leads in receptions, he's the number one tight end in PPR. You're going to start him. That's the only guy from the Raiders that you're ever going to want.
Yeah, I would agree. I will say about this matchup that I called it in the last one or two podcasts. I said Kareem Hunt, he's going to be the RB1 that you want to spend like 50% fab for on the waiver wire. And look at him, he's back to back 20-point games. So I'll just say I called that, and I'm going to call Juwan Jennings as well.
Yeah, I definitely didn't use. I would have had to use all of my fab in order to beat you for getting Kareem Hunt, and I mean he's definitely worked out for you, so can't really knock knock anything against it. You know what I mean? He's worked out. I kind of wish I had him.
And for anybody listening, if you're thinking that's too high of fab, just kind of question yourself. So Saquon was a first round pick this year. Would you spend 50% fab to get Saquon? That's kind of a similar situation. You're paying 50% for RB1 that's drafted in the first or second rounds if he wasn't a waiver wire pickup and he was an established player. So I think spending half your fab is totally worth it. And with that, we can go on to the Cowboys and the 49ers. How about our super 49ers fan begins our discussion with that?
I hate our team. I hate ours so much. Um, I do think that this is going to be a successful week for both Dallas and San Francisco. Um, Debo, I honestly I don't think Debo is going to play this week. He went to the hospital with pneumonia. I would be very shocked if he played this week. Uh, Considering that he went to the hospital and had a pneumonia-like illness, I would not play if I was him. That being said, everybody else is pretty much startable. If Juwan Jennings plays, he's a must start. George Kittle is George Kittle. He's been amazing this year. He's the tight end too. Jordan Mason is going to have a field day against this very bad running defense from the Dallas Cowboys. And I do expect Brock Purdy to have a much better week this week than what he had against Kansas City. On the flip side, I do think that Dak has a kryptonite, and their names are the San Francisco 49ers. He just always plays really horrible against them. So there's my skepticism. CD Lamb, you're always going to play. I feel like Jake Ferguson is a must start if you have him or drafted him as your tight end. Um, I think it's a very interesting matchup, but I'm very skeptical of a lot of the Dallas offense. What do you think, Matt?
Oh, definitely the same boat. Yeah, CeeDee Lamb is really the only must start. I'm actually in a predicament in one of my leagues right now. I have to decide, do I want to start Dak or do I want to start Baker without his wide receiver 1 and 2? What would you do, Vitrano, if you're in that decision?
Oh God. The 49ers pass defense is so much worse than I think people really are ready to acknowledge. But what I will say is the 49ers have allowed on average 12.4 fantasy points per game to the quarterback position, which is the fourth least in the entire NFL, and the Falcons have allowed over 17, which is good enough for, I believe that's 12th most in the NFL. So I would still probably start Baker. And again, I think that if there is a kryptonite of the Dallas Cowboys and particularly Dak Prescott, it has been and will always be the San Francisco 49ers for some reason. He looks like he's never thrown a football before when he plays us. So that's what I'm expecting. I would go ahead and start Baker.
Yeah, Dak has really not played super, super great yet. So I probably will end up starting Baker. I mean, he can throw the ball to somebody on the team and probably Kate Auden as long as he doesn't get super planned for. And then the 49ers, yeah, Jordan Mason's probably going to pop off. And then if Juwan Jennings plays, he's probably going to have a really great day because, yeah, Debo did go to the hospital with pneumonia. I did see that as well. And he's probably not going to be,
playing professional sports like the week after he's out of the hospital from pneumonia. So I would start Juwan Jennings and Jordan Mason and Kittle, of course, out of the 49ers and just CeeDee Lamb on the Cowboys. Now, Vitrano, let's get into our last game. That will be the Giants versus the Steelers. You can lead us on that one.
Um, this is a very interesting game for me because the Steelers actually look competent on offense, and it's such a crazy thing to say because I had said it and I got a lot of crap on Twitter for posting this, and that was basically, would the offense look a lot more successful if Russell Wilson was leading the offense instead of Justin Fields? And I think we saw last week that yes, they look a lot more competent. Yes, Justin Fields did keep hold of the ball. He didn't turn the ball over. They did win some games, but this offense just looks so much better with Russell Wilson in there throwing the ball. Even Najee is, playing out of his mind right now. Back-to-back 100-yard games with touchdowns. It's crazy. Pickens, 5 catches, 111 yards, and a touchdown. This whole offense just looks so much better that it's insane. Um, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I think Pickens is really talented, even though doesn't perform sometimes on games, but he's extremely talented. And yeah, the Steelers just do look a lot better with Russell Wilson. I think it's hard for people to admit it because Fields is a pretty nice guy. He plays decent, but I mean, people just don't want to admit it, but he cannot throw the ball. He is not a good passing QB, and that severely limits the Steelers. It severely limits their options. The other teams can plan against them easy because they know he can't throw well. But Russell Wilson just completely opened up the pass game with Pickens, a very talented wide receiver. And when the pass game's opening up, then they can't plan for the run as well, which opens Najee up. So yeah, I think Russell Wilson is opening up a lot of avenues for this offense.
I will say on top of that, um, Najee Harris. You have been very critical of Najee Harris of being a poor player. And you know what? There is some truth behind that. He did not have a good game against Indianapolis. He did not have that good of a game against Dallas, and he's been pretty average up until these last 2 weeks. But the Giants give up the second most rushing yards to the running back position, and they actually give up the second most touchdowns to the running back position. This could be a game where, Najee might have a really, really solid week again, might go back to back to back on those 100-yard games. It could happen, Matt.
Yeah, I definitely think it definitely could happen. I'm just critical on Najee because he's not. The Steelers just play that really like slow, gritty football. It's not really good for fantasy. And Najee is like very solid in real life. Like he'll get a couple yards per run every single time, but he never gets big runs for fantasy. Doesn't get and Najee, he is a team player. He is willing to run the clock out instead of getting a touchdown. So very good for real life, but in fantasy production, he is not the best player. So that's why I'm critical of him. But in real life, he's a team player, uh, solid for a few yards every time. But fantasy wise, he'll just not get you those points. But he is performing lately, so he might go for the third time in a row. So we'll just have to see.
Yeah, and when it comes to the other side, the Giants, this was a team a couple of weeks ago that we were probably much more excited about after seeing how they played against Seattle, um, than we are right now. Daniel Jones last week against Philadelphia looked like prime time Daniel Jones. Not really doing anything with the ball, but the highlights of this offense are again going to be Malik Neighbors, who did demand 8 targets last week, and Wandale Robinson, who got 9 himself. Uh, I do think that they are utilizing their wide receivers, uh, and I think that those are going to be the two guys that you're going to want to play from this Giants offense. Although the Steelers don't allow too many points per game to the wide receiver role, 14th least in the NFL. So they're about mid tier. That's how I feel about the Giants. What about you?
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add. Giants, very poor performing team overall. Malik Neighbors, a standout rookie wide receiver, so you're probably starting him. Yeah, other than that, I don't have anything to add. And I think we could close out our podcast today, Vitrano, by giving our parlay picks.
Yeah. So when I'm looking at these matchups, I'm gonna go with a simple three. My top three picks. I'm obviously gonna choose all of my favorites. I would definitely choose the spread in the Ravens game. Uh, or my top three, I would probably choose the Ravens spread, the Lions spread, and I would probably go ahead and choose the Broncos to beat the Panthers outright as my three-leg parlay overall. For this week, I would go ahead and choose the Vikings, the Ravens, the Lions, the Texans, the Packers. If Tua plays, I think it's the Dolphins, the Jets, the Falcons, the Eagles, the Saints, the Bills, the Bears, the Broncos, the Chiefs, the 49ers, and I'll choose the Steelers to win Monday night. What do you got, Matt?
Honestly, I'm pretty similar. I'm gonna go the Cardinals, regardless of Tua plays. And the hardest one for me is the Saints versus the Chargers, but I'm gonna go the Saints as well. And yeah, honestly, I have the same picks as you. I can't really predict anything else.
Yeah, and so there you guys have it. Our top picks for this week. Um, you got anything else for the audience, Matt?
Nothing else. Just thank you for anybody who listens. Hope we win you some matchups.
Yep, thank you guys for listening. Hopefully, you guys have continued to stick around. We're going to continue to do this every week now that we have our schedules hopefully much more aligned. So, that being said, we'll catch you guys next week. Peace.